Welcome to the Living Well Church podcast, and thanks for tuning in today. Our mission as a church is to help people find faith in Jesus and a life of purpose and hope. You're about to watch a message that will challenge you, inspire you, encourage you, and most of all, point you to Jesus and the life of purpose and hope He has planned for you. So lean in and enjoy, and let God speak into your life.
I'm talking this morning on giving with love, and so we felt that was appropriate to share from the youth to us this morning. So this week I had the privilege of being at a couple's home, and whilst I was there with Ralph, and we'd been invited, hadn't seen them for a short while, and I was around their house. Whilst I was there, they had a phone call, and it came to light after this phone call happened that basically someone had phoned up that they knew needing £250 for their mother. Basically, the bailiffs were at her door and she needed this money to kind of keep the bailiffs from her door. So the man of the couple had just arrived back basically from the airport. Okay, so it was in the morning, about 11 o'clock. So I imagine that person had been up quite early, taking someone to the airport, coming back. They then got a phone call saying they need £250. This person needs £250. They were literally talked to their wife within like literally a second conversation of, this person needs £250. She was like, well, go take them £250. That was literally the conversation. That person was about to go to the door. Now, I was the slightly suspicious person in that conversation and went, maybe just check exactly what £250 is for. Maybe take such and such with you. However, the heart of these people was that somebody had called. They desperately needed something. They didn't even know the mother of this person. They had just got back from driving somebody else to the airport. It wasn't convenient for them. They aren't the type of couple where £250 is just petty cash or small change, but they just went. And you know, I don't think it was a coincidence that at that exact time, Amy had also messaged me saying, what do you want to call your preach this weekend? And I replied back to her in that moment saying, giving without getting. Giving without getting. And that is what I'm going to talk about this morning, that actually when Jesus comes along and he talks about giving, he massively raises the bar on giving. He talks about it in this way that we just need to give in this abundant way. We give the £250, which isn't convenient, which we don't maybe have, but we do it without questioning. We do it with this heart from the overflow. And we do it even if it's like massively inconvenient to us. And so I just loved that picture that the Lord gave me this week, this kind of real example from our church of what the Lord's doing in our congregation, ready for this preach. So I'm going to look at Luke 6, they're going to pop up on the screen, verses 27 to 39. So if you want to turn to your Bibles, if you want to read it up there, by all means do. So it says, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who ill-treat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your tunic from them. Give to everyone who asks. And if anyone who takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies. Do good to them and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be the children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, passed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now, I just want to clarify, Jesus is saying this about our enemies. Yeah? He's saying this is how we treat our enemies, the people we don't like, who don't love us, who we don't get on with. This is how we are to treat them. And I'm just going to pull out 3 things from this passage, first of all. The first one I'm going to look at is when it says, it's verse 29, if someone takes your coat, do not withhold your tunic from them. Now, it's quite easy. Well, it's not. You might have a coat that you quite like, okay? You might have a coat that you think, well, I'm not too bothered about. There's loads of lost property at the back. Most of them are hoodies and coats. So actually, you come to the conclusion that some of us, coats or the outer layer is quite dispensable. If someone came along and stole your coat, actually, you wouldn't be too badly off. You might have loved that coat. You might have paid a fair price for it. You might be thinking, that's annoying. I'm going to be a bit chilly now. But it's not the worst thing in the world. So Jesus comes along and says, well, your cloak, if someone takes that, then do you know what? You offer them your tunic too. Now, most people he would speak to at this time would have literally had one tunic. So those in a certain class in the biblical times would have just had one tunic. So to give that tunic away would have been a huge cost to them. Plus, if you just, I'm not going to try and visualize it for you because we're in church, it might be slightly awkward. But if someone takes your coat and you've got to literally take your shirt or your dress off for them, it leaves you bare and vulnerable, doesn't it? And this is what Jesus is saying. He's coming along and says, don't just give to people what's dispensable. Give to them what leaves you bare and vulnerable. They're fully clothed. And now it's been a massive cost to you. And what I love is he's saying this is about our enemies. And maybe as a church, we could be honest and we could say, well, I could imagine this holy situation. You know, I don't know if you've seen Les Mis, where someone at the beginning comes and he robs the church basically. And the vicar at that time says, oh, you've missed the best silverware. You know, have this as well. And I wonder whether in this holy moment, if someone came and robbed us of our bag or our coat or something external, we maybe would whip off our dress and say, here, have this too. Do you know what I mean? I wonder if that holy moment would overtake us. And we'll do that for our enemies. However, if we actually claw it a little bit closer to home, I think this gets harder. Like, how about that person who you genuinely find a little bit annoying at work? You know, that person who keeps asking you loads of questions. Yeah? That person who keeps getting things and you just think, who keeps getting things wrong maybe a little bit. Do we maybe give them out what's dispensable, like our tiny little glimmers of time? Maybe in our heads we think we humour them, we'll be polite to them. But actually, do we give them what costs us, which leaves us bare and vulnerable? Do we go, come on, I'll take you for a drink. If you're struggling at work, let me actually take you through how to do some stuff properly. Maybe, you know, Jeff Lucas talks about this in a really humorous way about church. And he says what he loves is when people call him and says, oh, Jeff, I've got this old sofa that I'm about to give away. Do you want it? Or Jeff, you know, we've just bought a new car. We've got our old car. Do you want that? Or I've heard that someone in the church is collecting for clothes and we've done a clear out and there's some stuff that we don't want anymore. Do you want that? And Jeff Lucas, he's an extremely funny preacher. So he says it in this humorous way, which is probably easier to digest. And he says, do you know what he says to them on the phone? He goes, yeah, I'd rather than your old sofa, I'd rather the brand new one. Rather than that old car that you don't need anymore, I'll take the brand new one. Rather than those old clothes that you clear out and you just don't want, that are dispensable, I'll take the new ones you've just bought. Because that is a culture of going, don't give me what's dispensable. Don't just give me your cloaks. Give me your tunics. Give the best. Because Jesus is saying this is how we treat our enemies. So therefore, how on earth should we treat the church? We shouldn't just give them what's dispensable, what we don't need. We should give the absolute best, surely. And so we can make it even harder hitting. We could even look at those people who are amongst us. Our wives, our husbands, our partners, our friends, or even the people in church. Maybe someone was rude to you or didn't acknowledge you the other week. And maybe you think, I'll just shake it off. I'll just give them what's dispensable. I'll just be polite to them from now on. I can't be bothered to give them my friendship or my love or my grace. Christ doesn't say that. He says, whip your tunic off too. Give them actually what hurts. Give them what leaves you bare and vulnerable. Pour your love upon that person. Pour your grace upon that person. Maybe someone really hurt you. Maybe actually someone is the cause for your anxiety, for your pain, for the reason why now you're sat in church with a little bit of resentment harbored in your heart. And Jesus comes along and he says, don't just give them your politeness. Don't just give them what's dispensable. Whip off your tunic, give them that forgiveness. Give them that love. Give them that grace. Because that is how we're meant to even treat our enemies. So what on earth should we be doing for our brothers and sisters in Christ? And the second thing I want to look at is it then says shortly after that, give to everyone. In verse 30, give to everyone who asks. Give to everyone who asks. When I read that and when I think about this, I just think, really, give to everyone who asks. And my first immediate thought is, quite soon, Lord, I'm going to be broke and have absolutely no time. And that mentality instantly calls to question our thoughts of who owns what. Because actually, if we have the right view of the Lord, if we have the right view of the stuff that we have around us, we realise that actually we can give to everyone who asks. And I want to talk a little bit about this, and it's a thankful heart is a giving heart in which we give from the overflow. And it's been mentioned with Chris this morning when he was talking about the heart and giving from the overflow. James spoke about it as well, and I'm going to come back to what James said. But on the whole, a thankful heart is a giving heart that gives from the overflow. In the gospel, in Romans 6, verse 23, it says this very simply: the wages for sin is death. The wages for sin are death. Therefore, if we're sat here and we have sinned, if we've done something wrong in our lives, if we've told a lie, if we've stolen, if we've hated, if we've got angry, if we've used the Lord's name in vain, if we've put other things, prioritized other things before the Lord, unfortunately, we have done something wrong. And actually, what truly is the just punishment for doing something wrong is death. Outlines that really clearly in the Bible. But Jesus came along and he took that punishment for us. He took all those things wrong for us, so that when God looks at us, he sees that we're perfect. And therefore we can have a life with the Lord and an eternal life with him. Therefore, everything that we have is an absolute gift. Everything we have is an absolute gift. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 26, it says, "For the earth is the Lord's and all that it contains." If we know the Lord Jesus Christ and we know that he's taken our sin for us and we've therefore got a life on earth with him and a life in heaven with him, basically, we know that every moment is an absolute gift on this earth. Every time you wake up in the morning and you look at your spouse in the face, that is an absolute gift. Every time you kiss your child goodnight, that's an absolute gift. Every time you have a laugh with your friends, that is an absolute gift. Every time you drive from one place to another place really safely, that's an absolute gift. Every time you get to come to this church and we worship together, that's an absolute gift. And yet sometimes our mentality isn't that. James shared with us this morning that the Israelites, God was providing them with manna. See, the Israelites were in the desert. They didn't have any food. God provided all the food that they needed, and yet they still grumbled. They didn't realize the gifts that were consistently around them. And sometimes, unfortunately, we as Christians are very much like that. We're provided with so much goodness, with so much blessing, and yet we have unbelievable, ungrateful hearts. And when we have ungrateful hearts, we don't give. When we have any sense of ownership, oh, but that's mine. But Lord, I worked for that. I worked for that home. I worked for those clothes. I worked for that car. I worked for that job. I worked for that role in the church. I've earned that. As soon as we get that sort of attitude in our minds, we have this sense of ownership, this sense that we've earned something. We lose the fact that everything is a gift and our hearts are not thankful. Therefore, we don't bother giving whatsoever. And it's true. And you know, what's really funny is as soon as we think that we haven't got enough, we just chase more. And we put a seal on what's around us. We're a seal on what we have, thinking, oh, but this, what I've got isn't enough. Therefore, how dare I give that a little bit away? And you know, out of that ungrateful heart, we start to be even more ungrateful. Oh, but my relationship isn't quite where I want it. I'm not happy with this and that. My kids are like this. Oh, it's so annoying. They do this and they do that. As for the church, oh, the worship band don't sing the songs I like. They're not doing this at the moment. They're not going there at the moment. And suddenly, words of ungratitude, it's not even a word, but ungrateful words start to spring out of our mouths, rather than hearts that are truly grateful for the gifts that we constantly have. And we need to remind ourselves, that's why we do communion every week, we need to remind ourselves what we've been given. We've been given salvation. We've been given everlasting life. Like, what else surely do we need more than that? So therefore, anything on top of it is an absolute blessing from the Lord. And when we count our blessings, when we have a recognition of what we've got, we realize that the Lord is absolutely limitless, and it does not matter what we therefore give away. It doesn't matter what we give away. Because A, we realize the truth that for the earth is the Lord's and all that it contains. We realize the truth that he's abundantly blessed us with this reckless love. And therefore, we don't care about giving our tunic to. We don't care about giving something that's going to leave us bare and vulnerable, because we realize that Christ did that on the cross for us. Does that make sense? Yeah? Good. I'm glad you're with me. My third point is, and I like this point the most, it says, give without expecting in return. Give without expecting in return. And do you know what? I think we in our heads think this is probably quite easy and we do this. I think on the whole, maybe we've all at some point in our life given to a homeless person. We've given some sandwiches to them or something like that. We would never expect anything in return. Maybe we've given to a crisis appeal. We would never expect anything in return. I think that's quite justified. I think here we kind of think in our heads, tick, I do quite well. However, again, if we actually bring it closer to home, I think it gets harder. Bearing in mind, this is how we should treat our enemies. So, I wonder if you've got children, you've ever done this. Maybe you've taken them somewhere in the morning, or you've brought them somewhere, and you think, I've given you my time, and I've given you my attention, and I've given you something this morning. Therefore, this 10 minutes of peace with my magazine and my cup of coffee, I now deserve. Yeah? I've given you this. Give me this in return. So we've actually, the truth is, we've given fully expecting that later on in the day, we should be able to have those moments of peace. Yeah? I think actually we do that as parents. And if we think about it, it's kind of crazy. I reckon we do it with our partners. I reckon we do it with our spouses all the time. If I empty the dishwasher, and if I do the hoovering, then when they get home, they can do that bin. Because I don't want to do that. And then we have this full expectation. I've done the dishwasher, I've done the hoovering, they can fully do that. They want to go out to see Avengers Assembled tonight with their friend. If I say yes to that, that means when that opportunity comes along for me, I get to go to that. Yeah, and we kind of do these little deals maybe. Maybe it's more a female thing. I don't know if men actually think that fast. Sorry, men, not to be sexist. But I don't know if you're that calculating. But I think definitely as women, when I chat to my female friends, we do this all the time. It's like we do this, I'm going to give, but actually secretly I'm giving because I'm fully expecting in return. And what's funny is that we get even more annoyed when it doesn't happen the other way. Do you know what I mean? If, for example, if it doesn't happen, so if I've done the dishwasher and if I've done the hoovering and they don't come home and take out the bin automatically, now I am annoyed. Yeah, I am now annoyed, and I have the right to be annoyed because I'm standing in the just and righteous place because I have done the bins and I've done the dishwasher. Oh, no, not the bins. I never do that one, sorry. The hoovering, I don't want to lie on stage. the dishwasher and the hoovering. And if they go around and, they've gone out, they've watched Avengers Assemble, and they come back home, and and then you go, oh, I've got this opportunity, can I go to this, that night? And they go, oh, actually, I was really hoping we would do this together. I'll be like, yeah? Because we think we have this right to actually give and get in return. And Jesus says it's not about that. Jesus comes along and says, well, you give without expecting absolutely anything in return. And that's hard. I think it's particularly hard in marriage, genuinely. But if we're truly thankful, if we truly realise that we shouldn't have anything anyway, that we should be dead because we're sinners, and that actually we've got salvation, we've got a life with Jesus, if we're truly thankful for our marriage and for our spouse, then do you know what? We don't care. We're giving from the overflow all the time. Go on, take my cloak, take my tunic too. What does it matter? And maybe we're exactly like that with church. I give to the church. Therefore, I should expect to have some sort of say with what happens with that money. I've given my time maybe as well as my money. Therefore, I should definitely be able to control what happens with that. And maybe we get annoyed when we don't get what we want. When things go in a different direction. But I give my money to this and I give my time for this, and now they've decided to this. I don't agree with that. I'm now annoyed because I have a say. But the truth is, for the earth is the Lord's and all that it contains. Nothing I had anyway was mine. If we truly had that realization that actually everything is the Lord's, what does it matter? I shouldn't have any expectation of when I give that I should get anything in return. But I think we do this. I think we do it with our children. I think we do it with our spouses. I think we do it with our friends. I think we do it with our churches. I think we definitely do it with our friends. Oh, I've texted them the last few times. I've invited them out for the last few times. They haven't done that to me. It's their turn. Yeah, we do it. And unfortunately, Jesus comes along and says, this is how you should treat your enemies. We should give to them without getting. Therefore, with our friends, with our church, with our children, with our husbands and wives, we should give without getting anything in return. And that's hard. That's challenging, particularly when things aren't going the way you think they should or the way that you want them to. But it's what Jesus has told us, because Jesus didn't do this. Jesus gave. He gave recklessly, he gave completely, he gave his whole heart, he gave his whole life without getting anything in return. And the thing is, we've got to get this right, because if we somehow kid ourselves that we're doing these things, if we somehow kid ourselves that we would, if it came to it, give our tunic as well as our cloak, if we kid ourselves that we would give to anyone who asks, if we can kid ourselves that we would give without expecting anything in return, and we're not doing it to the people in here, then there is no chance on this earth that we would do it to anyone in town. That we would do it to anyone in town. And you can sit there and you can say, absolutely, Beth, actually I'd rather give to the people in town than to people in here. I'll be like, really? That person stood outside Boots, swearing, wearing inappropriate clothing, who's from a different country? I'm being really realistic here, and I know that will touch a few nerves, but you're telling me that you're going to give to them without getting anything in return? That you're going to pour abundant blessing on them? That you give your cloak and your tunic to? If you can't do it to your brother or sister who sat here in this congregation, you can't tell me you do that. So we have to really push the boundaries with our giving. And you know, I've got 5 minutes. I'm just going to finish up with this on this 5 minutes. As I've been spending time with the Lord, I've really been asking the Lord, what do you want for us? What do you want for us as a congregation? Where do you want us to go next? What are we doing here? Why am I speaking about this? And I really feel the Lord says you are to become investors of people. A few years ago, quite a long time ago now in schools, you used to get these awards, investors of people. And it was to say that we invested well, we invested wisely, and we saw progress happen because we invested. And in Matthew 26, verse 14, basically there's a parable of people with talents that invested. And I'll just summarize it for you. There's basically 3 servants. And the master gives the servants these different sums of money. 2 of them, with those sums of money, go and they invest it. 1 of them goes and buries it in the ground. And as a response, the master comes back and he says, what have you done with your money? Well, the 2 that have invested it go, we've earned you double. Here we are. Here's double your money back. The one that buried it in the ground just goes, well, I've just got what you gave me because I went and buried it. The master is not it's actually exceptionally harsh to the person who went and buried it in the ground, but really praised and said, good and faithful servants to the one who went and invested it. If you want to read that parable, it's in Matthew 25 and it's from verse 14. And what I feel the Lord is saying at this moment in time is we need to be people investing. And do you know what? We as a leadership team, I can say this, we are investing in the kingdom. That is what our hearts beat for. That's what we care about most. What we want is the people out there to be saved. Bottom line. That is what this church is about. It is about saving the lost. In order to do that, we might well need to equip and build up the church so that we are more ready to go out and save the lost. But the bottom line is we want the kingdom to grow. Therefore, we invest. We invest our time. We invest our money. We invest our energies. And you know what? We invest without judgment. We invest with abundance. And we invest without any personal return. And as a church, I think we've got this calling to become investors. And we invest in what we love. We invest in what our hearts overflow for. So if you love your family, invest in your family. Put your time in your family. Put your heart into your family. Put your money into your family. If you love your work, put your heart into your work. Put your time into your work. Put your money into your work. But do you know what? There's no greater calling than investing in the kingdom. Because as Katie spoke 2 weeks ago, unfortunately, there will be that point that we die. And there's lots of things that we don't get to take with us. But whatever we've done for the kingdom counts for eternity. So I'm telling you, the best thing you can invest in is the kingdom. Put your heart into the kingdom. Put your time into the kingdom. And put your love into the kingdom. And you know, investing is tough. Because quite often when you first invest, you won't see anything. You know, lots of startup businesses actually don't make a profit within the first 3 years. And so when you start to invest maybe in the kingdom, you start to put your time into youth, or you start to put your time into children's work, or you start to put your time into Tiny Toes, or you start to put your time into worship, or you start to put your energies out there evangelizing on the streets, you might not see any return for ages. For ages. You might not see any comeback for a really long time, any fruit for a really long time. Because waiting is really hard. With investment, there's often not an instant gain, instant gratification, and often it really costs us our cloak and our tunic too. But the Lord calls us to invest. And as a church, it says this in these verses that I read. It says, be merciful. And it says, do not judge or you not be judged. And do you know what? I think we need to club together a little bit of that. That we need to, as we invest into the kingdom, not to judge one another and to be merciful and extend grace to one another. Let me explain in real detail what I mean. Elsham is difficult right now. I think Joe will nod and say, yeah. We haven't been able to find the land that we need to start the church. There's waiting in that. But we as a church feel called that the Lord has said, invest in Elsham. So we're investing in Joe. Not with money, sorry Joe. But with our time, with our love, with training, with what we can give him. We're investing in giving some thought into how we go about Elsham. But it's tough. We're not seeing any reward. We're not seeing any gain. It's tough. Investment is tough. But if we knew, if we could fast forward 10 years in time and we saw a church of 200, 300 boosting in Elsham, we wouldn't have any doubt, would we? That's what we invest in. But we don't see that right now as we stand up here. We have to kind of take our cloak off and our tunic too. We have to give to everyone who asks. And we have to give without expecting anything in return. And suddenly when you create something in front of you which is really obvious, like Elsham, it's really tough suddenly when you're not getting anything in return. When actually you only want to give your cloak, those dispensable bits. And actually you don't want to give to anyone who asks. And how about people? When we try and invest into younger people in this church, when we try and raise up next worship leaders, next preachers, next teachers, next leaders, they might stand on this stage and they might make many mistakes. They might not be great. They might do things that we all think, oh, I wouldn't have done that. But we're investing in them. We're investing in them that we think, and with the hope and with the grace and with the love, that in 5-10 years' time, they're going to be phenomenal. We light up this world for Jesus Christ and be expanding the kingdom. You know, Mike Pivolacci, when he first let Matt Redman lead worship, he said for the first few times it was absolutely horrendous. He says it was a huge car crash. He did. And he said, but now look, Matt Redman has done so much work expanding his kingdom. And his wife, Beth, too. And his whole family. So we're called to be investors of people. So I'm going to finish this off really simply. To one another here, to your families, to your church family, which everyone's sat in here, and to the church, I'd like to challenge you by saying, don't just give your cloak, but give your tunic too. Give to everyone who asks with an unbelievable thankful heart. And give without expecting anything in return. But lastly, invest. Invest knowing that we have a heart of just building the kingdom. Don't judge it. Please don't judge. Be merciful. Be gracious. And trust with your investment. Thanks.